All right, today I'm digging into a carburetor on a Honda ATC110 Three Wheeler. This carburetor is obviously off of the Three Wheeler at this time. I've done several other videos on this machine, rebuilding it, adjusting clutches, going through suspension, doing overviews and services. I just wanted to show you how to go through and clean and then show you some details on this carburetor. Like I said, carburetor's off. One thing a little bit unusual about this carburetor is it's got the fuel petcock attached to the carburetor. A lot of times that is on the actual fuel tank. If we are pulling this off of the three-wheeler here, we are going to have fuel just dumping out of that fuel tank because these lines come straight from the fuel tank, go to the petcock here. Now, if we are just going to pull this bottom bowl off here, we would want to shut that fuel off, turn it in the horizontal position there. To turn your fuel petcock on reserve, you want to make sure that your knob here is going in that position there. Your arrow is facing up, which is reserve. You're actually going to be using that bottom nipple there. That's going to come from your reserve line on your tank. It's going to have a smaller stub inside of your fuel tank, and I can go through those details on a separate video. But up position there, your knob is actually more of its down, arrow facing up. That's reserve, using that nipple there. Flip your fuel petcock all the way the other way. Majority of your knob is on the top side. Arrow is facing down to on. That's going to utilize that bottom nipple there. The other thing to note here is your choke assembly. So to go ahead and choke your ATC there, you're going to actually take that knob and turn it in the up position there, which is going to be the airbox side. So keep that in mind. Airbox is here. If you're wanting to choke your three-wheeler here, flip that knob that way. If you're wanting to take the choke off, flip your knob down. The other thing to take a look at here is your air, your butterfly here, your intake is coming in this direction. Now, if your choke is in the off position, that's going to allow the most amount of air to flow through there. See, if you choke it there, turn it to the up position, it shuts that butterfly there, and no air is going to be flowing through this area, or at least very, very little. It's going to utilize these bottom ports here, which is in turn going to utilize your pilot jet, and I'll show you that when it gets down in here. But that pilot jet, it's going to help your three-wheeler to start, along with putting it in the choke position. Now, when you get the three-wheeler warmed up, you'll want to kick that choke off, that position there. That way air can freely flow through there. The other thing you'll notice here, when you do have the choke off, now you're going to give it throttle, and that throttle cable is going to come down through there. It's actually going to take, when you give it throttle, it's going to take and push that slide up, push that needle up. I'll show you that when I get into it a little bit farther. It's going to allow more fuel to get sucked up out of that bottom bowl there through your main jet and into your motor. So a couple things to go over on the outside of the carburetor, as well as your idle adjust is here. That you can either adjust it with a flathead screwdriver, or a lot of times you can actually take your fingers and turn it very, very small increments at a time. But there is your adjustment there. And typically what is happening is when you turn your idle up, so turn it clockwise, you're running that screw in, you're raising that slide, which allows more fuel flow through there, also allows more air to flow through there. So consequently, when you turn that screw counterclockwise, it's going to lower that slide, lower that needle, cut off the fuel supply, and you're not going to get as much fuel flowing through there, nor will you get as much air through there. The other thing on this side here, kind of a lot going on this side on this carburetor, is your air fuel screw, which is here. And how that is adjusted is you run that all the way in, count the number of turns in, and that is your adjustment there is the number of turns out. So you may see your manual calls for 1.5 turns out. You would sink that screw in there, turn it all the way until it's seated, and then pull that out 1.5 turns if that's what your manual shows. It's going to be different for different riding altitudes. It's going to be different environments. If you've got more humidity, less humidity, again, different altitudes or different performance stuff done to your machine, you're going to want to adjust that air fuel screw. On the top here, obviously, if we have this carburetor off of the three-wheeler, we've already removed this cap because off of the three-wheeler. in order to get that throttle cable out of there. Now, normally, if that throttle cable was still attached, the spring, the slide, and the cap would all come up together. And I'll kind of show you what that's going to look like there. Okay, if that throttle cable was still attached, all of this would come up together. So I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to show you what we're doing here. So we've got your needle, you got your slide, you got your spring, you got a couple different parts that are going to be down in here, and I'll show you those. So to remove your throttle cable off of your slide here, what I do is I take my thumb and take my hand here, put it over top of that spring, and I just take and pry this spring up. Now again, you're going to have a throttle cable holding all this together. So once you get that spring pulled up, now I'm going to take and actually pinch the cable. I'm going to push it down, and I'm going to take it out of that groove there that's on the bottom of the slide. Take it out that groove, slide it up this slide here, and then your slide and your needle going to be detached. Then we've got your spring. You can slide it off the end of the cable, and your cable can be slid right out of here. It's not threaded on here. This is completely unattached here from your actual cable, and we can take and set that aside. We'll set that aside for now. We've got your slide here, like I said, we've got a needle down there. And now what I do, if I'm gonna clean this or take this needle out, I'll take a small pair of pliers here, take and grab, there's a little keeper in there, it looks like that. Just go ahead and pinch that with your pliers. Then you can take and slide your needle up. There is your needle there. It's got different grooves. It's also got a size engraved on it, so keep an eye out for that. If you've got a jet kit, make sure you put in the same needle in there. You also want to make sure that you've got your setting correctly on your clip here. So it looks like it's on the middle one, which would be the third up from the bottom, or the third down from the top. So it's right in the middle. There's 5 different grooves there to put your clip. And we're going back together then, slide that needle down there. And we'll take that clip that holds that needle in there, set it in there, and push it down the rest of the way. That is your slide there. Now we've got your bottom bowl, which is here, and we've got 2 Phillips screws on here. We'll remove those. This is your drain for your bowl. If you want to drain that fuel out, make sure you've got a hose hooked on here. That's just a drain line. You can unscrew this a couple turns, and that fuel will start dumping out this bottom nipple here. Now, I told you want to make sure you've got a vent line on there, because if you don't do that, that fuel is going to dump directly onto your motor. It's going to cause discoloration on your motor there. If you don't happen to have that fuel on there, if fuel is sloshing around either in the back of a pickup or a trailer, or driving around on trails, you will constantly be having fuel drip out of that overflow tube here, that bottom nipple, and again, it'll drain directly onto your crankcase there. So pull this bottom bowl off here. I'm going to let these screws drop. We've got your fuel petcock here, so we've got fuel coming in here. Your fuel comes from your fuel tank. Again, I said goes through here, runs through a screen in here. You've got a fuel filter inside of here, runs down the side here through this port there, and then actually comes up and goes through that port there, comes down here and dumps out where this needle valve is here. I'm going to set that aside and go through this bottom bowl here for now, but I wanted to show you that. So you've got fuel coming in here. Again, reserve here, on here, comes through, goes through here. This is crucial that you've got a good O-ring in here. If this O-ring is not sealed, you'll have fuel leaking out of this bottom bowl here. The other thing I mentioned, the overflow tube. That tube is here. I'm going to get it to an angle that you can see it right there. And if fuel's sloshing around in here, if you're riding around on trails or bouncing around the back of a pickup, fuel's going to slosh around. It's going to come out that bottom orifice there. It's going to dump out your bottom overflow. So if you take compressed air or carbon choke cleaner and blow in that port there, you will have air or carbon choke cleaner dumping out this bottom nipple here. So keep that in mind. Now, to stop that from happening, if your three-wheeler is sitting in the shop and you're having a constant leak out this bottom hose here, what the issue is your needle valve. And I'm going to show you how to get to there. We've got a pin that you push out right here. If this pin is stuck or it's very, very hard to get out, be very careful. These posts right here and right here, if they get damaged or broken, there's nothing you can do about it. Throw your carburetor away and buy a different one. Now, that being said, be careful on which carburetors you buy. There's a lot of knockoff carburetors, unbranded, Caltrick, a couple other brands out there that are extremely poor quality. you could get these carburetors put on your 3-wheelers or your 4-wheelers and have some serious motor damage done because these carburetors aren't bored out and drilled out correctly. So keep that in mind when it comes to buying a new carburetor. Make sure you go back together with a genuine high quality Honda carburetor, which is made by K&, and it'll say there K&, and it says Japan on it. If it has another word there, or sometimes they just misspell K&, or they have other words or letters engraved in there, just be careful. You've got a genuine carburetor. You want to make sure that it's genuine and not some knockoff garbage. That being said, a lot of times you can get used carburetors that are rebuilt. Check my eBay store. I've got hundreds of carburetors listed. I go through and rebuild these carburetors. I want to make sure that you're getting high quality carburetors that are cleaned and ready to go. I don't want you getting garbage that you have to throw away and then you have to go and buy a genuine carburetor. They've got a number here scribed in there. This number is a 20A0TA. So keep that in mind. There should be a number engraved in there. Flipping that carburetor up, going back to our needle valve here. So we've got fuel coming in this petcock here, going in that valve there, going in that valve there, running down here, and then coming out of our needle valve area. We've pulled this pin. Now we're able to lift that float out. And you can take your needle valve and inspect it there. Now if it is grooved, if you're always having fuel on in your shop or in your garage, when you go in there after overnight or after a week or so, it's because your needle valve here is either stuck or it's damaged. Now it's got a rubber tip on it. You want to inspect it, make sure there's no grooving. And then if there's no grooving, you want to look down in here, make sure there's nothing stuck in here, because what that is doing is holding that open. Now if you've got a if you've got a good needle on there and it goes in the up position because your carburetor is full of fuel, so it's in the up position just like a toilet bowl would be, and the up position should shut that fuel off. When that fuel starts to drain, that float will drop down, allowing more fuel to come through that valve area there. Now when that fills back up, it's going to shut that valve, it's going to raise that float there, and it's going to shut that fuel off. So you want to make sure you inspect that needle, make sure it's in good condition. Next thing, you've got a main jet here, and this is a flat screw. And a lot of times what happens when you pull this main jet, you've got your main jet holder that's going to come with it. So that's the case here. Your main jet is actually right here. It's very, very small main jet there. And then it runs into your main jet holder, which is this entire brass fitting here. You want to make sure you can hold this up to light and make sure you can see all the way through it. Make sure you can see through these holes here, these ports. That all allows that fuel to come up. I mentioned earlier, when your choke is off, so in this position there, your slide is up, so you're giving it throttle. That's going to pull your slide and your needle up. It's going to pull fuel from your bottom bowl area up through your main jet and into your carburetor and then down into your motor. Now if you change out your main jet size to a little bit smaller, that's going to restrict the amount of fuel that flows up there. You're giving your 3-wheeler throttle. That's going to suck that air through there, suck that fuel up through there. If you've got a smaller main jet, you're not going to have as much fuel that's going to be able to flow through that main jet area there and dump into your motor. Likewise, if you add a larger main jet, that's going to allow more fuel to flow up through your main jet area into your motor. So if you've got performance parts on your 4-wheeler, if you've got air filters or exhaust, you want to make sure you change that main jet because you're going to need a little more fuel. You're going to want your 3-wheeler running a little more rich. So again, make sure you clean that out, make sure it's in good condition. Now to get your pilot jet on this model, it's not a screw type, and I wish they would make it a screw type because it makes it a lot easier, because you can damage these pilot screws very, very easily when you go to remove these. This is the pilot jet here. It's got a very, very small orifice that goes through there. You should, when you hold this up to light, be able to see through that pilot jet there, because what you're doing is actually looking into your carburetor here, and you can see there's a little jet that goes up, or a little orifice that goes up right there. A lot of times you can see a little bit better from this angle here, but it's right inside that carburetor. You've got a little orifice, and that's your pilot jet area. So when your 4-wheeler is being choked or when you're not giving it any throttle, any thumb throttle, you're sliding your needles completely down, so it's shutting off the fuel to the main jet there, and it's always pulling fuel out of your pilot jet there. So if your pilot jet is plugged, you're gonna have a hard time getting your three-wheeler to idle correctly. You're also gonna have a hard time getting it to start, because that is the orifice that is getting fuel sucked up through it when it is idling. So grab your pair of very, very small channel locks. You want to make sure you don't pinch it very hard. You can crush this brass pilot jet here by pinching it too hard. So very, very lightly squeeze on there, and then you can take and remove that pilot jet. Now, you same thing as your main jet holder there. You've got orifices on the side here. You've got small holes, and you also want to make sure that you can take and hold this up to daylight. Make sure you can see all the way through it. If you can't, take a jet cleaner, and I can get you those. I'll put a link below. Clean this orifice out, and so that you can see daylight through there. You also want to use compressed air and carbon choke cleaner to do that. Now, to get that back in there, a lot of times what I do, stick it in there, then I'll take and I'll just push it down. You don't have to take a hammer, don't beat on it. You don't want to damage that area. Main jet, slide that back in there, turn it all the way down, snug it up. Now, you want to make sure you've got the correct size flat screwdriver, because if you have too small of a screwdriver, you're going to damage that jet there. You're going to turn that screwdriver inside of that jet there. It's going to cause it to be restricted. Now we've got our needle valve and our float and our pin next. Slide that on there. There's only one direction that it'll go. Slide that in place there. This is not an adjustable float, just in case you're wondering. Set that down there and make sure that that is going up and down like it should, closing and shutting like it should. Slide your pin through there, and you should be able to raise and lower that. If you hold this up to an auxiliary bottle, once you get your bowl on there, hold the carburetor below it, make sure your fuel's on. You should be able to open and shut that fuel off. The problem is your fuel petcock is on here, so it's hard to get that fuel to flow through there without having your bowl on. So that's going to cause a little bit of an issue there if you try to do that test. What I would do is just replace that needle jet, and I will show you where to get that. I'll put a link as well below so that you know where to get the proper needle jet. Now take our bowl there, inspect this O-ring, make sure it's in good condition, make sure you put it on the right direction. You should have your fuel coming in here. This port here should sit right above there. Set that down. Make sure you don't have to force it on there, push it on there. It should just set straight on, and then you should be able to put those screws and snug these up. Now, you don't have to go Hulk mode on these because you've got an O-ring that's going to do the sealing. And if you turn these on there and really crank them in, you will just make it very, very difficult for the next guy to get this carburetor taken apart and clean. If this three-wheeler or four-wheeler sits around for any amount of time at all, you will have to clean it. That's just part of owning a small three-wheeler or four-wheeler. Now take our spring. If we have the cable here, we would assemble all of this right now. And what I would probably do if the rest of your three-wheeler is complete, I would assemble this while it's on the three-wheeler. So you just have this sitting here just like this. You won't have to hold it together. You've got two grooves here, one on this side, one on this side. This side, the slat is all the way down. This side is just a portion of it. This is going to be your idle adjuster side. So you see your idle adjuster there. You're going to set that right down in your idle adjust area. You also want to make sure that your needle slides down into place there. Otherwise, you're going to be working against yourself. You're going to push your needle right back up there, and that's not going to work very well. Slide that cap on. Make sure you've got those threads going straight and in the right direction, and snug that up. Again, you should be able to give it some thumb throttle there. It should take and slide up. It should slide back down freely. If it does not, you've done something wrong, and you definitely want to take care of that before you cause a major accident with your three-wheeler. If you guys have questions or comments, make sure leave those below. If this video has been helpful, please make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Send this video all over the world so we can help each other get your three-wheelers running perfectly. And let me know if there's any other videos you want me to do on this machine. Thanks for watching.